Hey everyone. So I guess if you were to ask me the question of what the biggest surprise of this chapter was, it's the character work with Juichiro Kaji and how Suzuki kind of flipped the script on his usual character type. Like was someone like Juichiro. Usually people like that are characterized as the sleeping giant, a character who's unassuming and quiet, but really is this confident and skilled badass. But as the chapter shows, well, yes, he might be skilled. He's also very unsure of himself, questioning every little thing, constantly uncertain of when he should act or whether or not people would even listen to what he has to say. Like Joichiro underneath that stone-faced demeanor is a hot mess of insecurity, and while it's a little convenient to use Shin to be the one to give him the pep talk, it still works for that whole idea that all it takes is one person to tell you to go for it. Throw yourself in there, throw caution to the wind, go all in, and worry about the consequences later. And I might be wrong on this, but it does feel like Suzuki took a lot of the influence of Fujishi's character from Chad and Bleach. Not a one-for-one copy, but it definitely feels like there's a little bit of flavor and a little bit of influence there with the character. Now, in saying that, I do need to make a bit of a correction, as it wasn't until this chapter, yeah, I know I'm late to the game, where I realized Shinea isn't a robot. He's an actual person who's just being controlled using the VR setup. So, yeah, a bit of a mistake on my part, but that does in itself beg the question, if Shinea is someone who just got knocked out and took who they just knocked out and took control of using the VR system, that they're using, then that just kind of begs the question of how much longer before he regains consciousness, or will he? Like, just the idea itself of Gaku controlling someone using this tech, that to me that to me is something that this tells me that something is going to happen on Shanae's end of things, where he gets knocked back to consciousness, and just something is going to happen with Shania where the whole Gaku, like where basically Uzuki's whole plan here of controlling him is going to backfire. Especially now that I know the logistics of how this works, like something's got to give. And now, it'll probably only happen in the climax of the fight, but it would be still kind of interesting if Shania waking up screwed up their plans in general more than him just getting the tar beat out of him. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they handle that. Um, with that said, I like how this chapter also exposed a weakness of the VR, as we come to learn because the optics of this has a very limited field of view, there are in fact blind spots that can be exploited, which in itself is the reason Gaku has had to be very specific with his movements in order to cover for those weak points. With the one advantage he has had in is the fact that Shin can't use his clairvoyance, although because Shinaya himself just isn't like conscious. Although now that Juichiro has found his confidence, it'll be and seems to know of what's going on, it'll be interesting to see him be this kind of point man and utilize all the players on the board, and how he'll use Shin, especially despite the obvious weakness of not being able to use his clairvoyance. And yeah, obviously my favorite moment of this chapter was the combo maneuver with Nao and Mafuyu, with the latter using Nao's weapon as a springboard to lunge himself at Gaku. And although that attempt failed, I do like how this moment does kind of showcase the development Mafuyu has already made. Because when we first met Mafuyu, he didn't want to get his hands dirty or do the heavy lifting needed to work towards his goal. But this one scene shows he is willing to put in the work, even if it means getting a little banged up in the process. Like, he's moved beyond his old weakness, you could say. Now, if there is one critique I have, not only with this chapter, but the arc as a whole, I'd say it's a little weird to me that Suzuki has left the confrontation between Akira and Taro about Rion's fate as this sort of dangling plot thread, and just not covering it again. Although with the knowledge that this is only part one of the overall JCC story, I imagine we're not going to see it fully realized or fully addressed until we move on to that part two. Which, admittedly, if that's the case, it's going to be one of those things where I'll understand why, but it does feel a little like a dead air setup, where you set up for this big reveal, but you're switching gears and not gonna make the actual reveal until much later. Like, it's kind of one of those weird things where, again, I understand why stuff like that is made, but it's like, why even set that up? Although in saying that, I could be reading it wrong, reading the whole situation wrong, and that whole scene with Akira asking Taro how he knew about Akira was really only meant to raise suspicion. Maybe that's it, but it's like, yeah, it still feels a little bit odd, if I'm being honest about it. Like, something, there needs to be a little bit more there for me. But yeah, guys, that's pretty much all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe if you're on Blue Sky, and on this Crunchyroll, wish notification bell, subscribe button, and just shove it around, guys. Dark Knight of a Night signing off. Later, everyone.